are live. Welcome back to the Mighty Emotions podcast. I am Giselle, and today I have a really fun guest. Please welcome Bhavna to the podcast. Thank you so much for
Hi.
being here. Bhavna is a counselor and an energy therapist, and we connected at an event recently. And we found out what each other does, and we're like, oh, this is great. We need to get on an episode together. So I really appreciate you making the time. We'll probably do another episode as well because we just won't have enough time to get through everything we want to get through. But before we dive into kind of what we want to talk about today, I thought maybe you could introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, my name is Pavna, as you already said. I'm a counselor and energy therapist. I've lived in Montreal for about 11 years now, but I grew up mostly in Asia. And yeah, I think you already gave us a pretty good introduction. I just wanted to add that it was a total accident that we sat next to each other and we do the
Oh,
same things. And also that your Instagram handle is Mighty Emotions, and my name literally means emotions.
when
So
you
I love
told me that, I was like, I mean, come on, come on. It was the universe at work, really and truly. So very, very grateful for this connection because you're familiar with the work that I do, and we do similar work in terms of how we support people emotionally, energetically. And because of your background as well, I just thought it would be so good to get your perspective, to just chat so that the listeners could get a different viewpoint on some really common topics right now in the social media space, especially. There's amazing people doing amazing things, but I do think that sometimes nuance is missing. I don't know how you feel about that.
Definitely, definitely. And I think the social media space is designed in that way where it's not really set up for
Mm,
nuance. But what kind of hurts me sometimes is seeing absolute beginners kind of misunderstand things and then blame themselves,
yes.
like the mindset
Yes.
we're talking about.
Yes, 100%. I literally got off a call right before this with someone struggling. And so we're going to get into some topics and sharing our perspectives that hopefully can help somebody who right now is struggling with their emotions or struggling with their mental health and blaming themselves for it, to kind of treat themselves with a bit more compassion, a bit more kindness, be a bit more gentle. So the first thing, let's dive right into it, is big misconceptions about emotions. So in my work, I don't believe in negative emotions. I stopped believing in negative emotions a while ago. Because it wasn't supporting me to believe in them, to be honest. And I realized through my study and through my own personal experience relating to my emotions in a new way that they aren't actually negative. They're actually always indications, signals. I call them like our instincts, right, as humans, of where I need to pay attention, of where I need to realign. And so I know in your energy kind of therapy work, you work with obviously the body, and our emotions are energy within our body, right? So how does that kind of come up in your work? Misconceptions about emotions.
Yeah, I get a lot of people who think they need to force themselves to think in a specific way because that's
Mhm.
what they've been told. Like positive thoughts lead to positive emotions. And actually, it's very much the reverse. Positive emotions lead to positive thoughts. And,
Yes.
you need to let yourself cycle through all the emotions to arrive at the quote unquote positive ones. So, yeah, that's a big kind of misconception that I have to address in my work. Like, hey, this part of you is welcome here too. Like, and, we carry around so much shame from our experiences in the world, and sometimes people aren't even aware that what they're feeling, the ickiness they're feeling, the discomfort they're feeling is actually deep shame. So it's like slowly being like, okay, let's make a little more room for that, instead of being like everything is fine, I need this but everything else is good, so I'm not allowed to look at this other thing that I need. But yeah.
Absolutely. Like that is such a core part of what I help people realize is that every emotion is an indication of an unmet need. I think that we place a lot of, partially, I mean, tell me what you think, but partially I think it's because so much of the time we're in this fight or flight state or in some kind of trauma response that we're only able to really focus on our physical needs, like the tangible needs, right? And I think that the spiritual and mental and emotional needs tend to get neglected or overlooked.
Absolutely. I think I tend to also work with people who've been in the personal development space for a while. So, what's actually happened is that they've become really self aware. They've learned a lot about the map of their problems, but not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily how to like sink into their body and allow some of these problems to kind of take place. And when I say take
Mm-hmm.
place, I mean when you're allowing them in, you're feeling them as sensations, as the sensations
Yes.
in your body, and that allows them to cycle through, and that allows you to move through the problem, right, rather than stay hyper aware of the intellectual map of your problem.
Exactly. Yes. It's so much time I think we're trying to relate to the idea of our emotions instead of relating to the emotions themselves, right? And like actually becoming familiar with what anger feels like and where it's showing up in my body and where sadness is showing up in my body, right? It's like there's this it's just this generalized kind of sensation that's going on because we're not really taught how to recognize it. And I'm just wondering how in your experience, like what has helped people to recognize that it's shame, for
Mhm.
example, or that it's sadness?
Well, I just want to go back to what you said for a second, and it's like the point of recognizing it. You had said something about no,
Relating to the idea of
oh,
it versus
right.
relating.
That emotions are data, and that emotions
Yes.
inform you. They give you information about what's going on, not just inside you, but outside you. And I feel
Yes.
like becoming aware of it is like, oh, let me first become aware of it, and then what is it trying to tell me? Because
Yes.
sometimes we're ignoring things in this attempt to follow our mindset, like good vibes only, or like I
Yes.
just have to say that I'm fine and then I'll be fine. And it's like there is some truth to that, but it's missing the nuance of hey, you need to be listening to a lot of other pieces.
Absolutely. I think that the truth to it is that I like to call it emotional ideas versus emotional instincts. So to me, there's the instincts part, which is the animal primal part that is just going to be activated. It's automatic, it's involuntary, you can't do anything about it. And then we have like these emotional ideas to me, which are the beliefs that we have, these ideas that we have emotional attachment to. Something happens to us and we create a story, and the story and the feeling kind of merge together, and that becomes our way of interpreting situations or understanding the world. And we can change our beliefs, and when we change our beliefs, how we feel physically does change, right? But I think there's kind of this lack of understanding that feelings and emotions are not the same thing necessarily, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what your definition of feelings versus emotions is?
Yes, so absolutely. So to me, feelings are the beliefs, like I call it emotional ideas. Like feelings are, I feel this way about this thing. It's the way we're interpreting the experience. Whereas the emotion is just the primal instinct of this need isn't getting met. This is you're going to be triggered by this kind of thing. So we carry around kind of both of these elements. So for me, an emotion like it goes back to the core emotions. Maybe there's like sadness and there's shame, but I might be interpreting something somebody said to me in a way that's activating shame within me, whereas having a different perspective or having different kind of underlying beliefs, I would have interpreted the way they spoke to me differently. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And this kind of goes back thousands of years. Like the practice of Buddhist meditation is just about being able to create like why do we sit? It's not this, now it's a trendy thing. And I'm
Hmm.
happy it's trending because we need access to this. But
Yes.
the original intention and the deeper intention when you look today is very much about cultivating that split second between your primal instinctual emotion and then
Hmm.
your meta brain that can jump in and be like, okay, I am feeling absolute rage. I am seeing red,
Hmm.
but I
Hmm.
have enough self control, and not self control that stems from suppression, self control that stems from having developed that brief pause to be like, how do I want to express this anger? Do I want
Yes.
to state my boundaries firmly rather than, for example, lash out or have a tantrum or, and just
Absolutely.
having that split second. And this is not new. This is not new at all. Like,
No.
this literally goes back thousands and thousands of years.
I just find it, I mean, I'm a mom and to a toddler, and so watching this human being develop in real time, I'm like, my mind is just blown at what's natural for us. Getting to see that before we're able to create that pause, we are just instincts. We're just the emotion, right? It's like she's not getting what she needs, and that's coming up within her, and she's having a tantrum about it. And it's like as we mature, as we develop, that's where the feelings kind of fit in, like I was saying earlier, because we start to interpret things as we get older. We start to say, oh, this means this. Oh, if this happens, it means that. It's because of that. And we don't realize that the way we interpret things is so multi-layered and nuanced. Like two people can experience the exact same thing and come away with different understandings of why it happened, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also think this part of cultivating this compassionate witness that we were talking about, that pause, is
Hmm.
very much about decoupling your emotions from the interpretations. So you
Yes.
can see things from an objective lens, so they're not being colored by your past experiences all the time. And there's nothing wrong with having our past experiences color our current perceptions. In fact, evolutionarily there's a lot of benefit in that. But when it's causing you a lot of distress, like for example, if you're overlaying a past trauma onto a current relationship, that's when
Yes.
that need of like that pause and that compassionate witness becomes really necessary.
Absolutely. I mean, I have experience with that. And this kind of dovetails into some other things we're going to talk about when it comes to healing and being healed and getting to the place where, things don't bother you anymore. And in my work, I teach people that there is resolution. There is a way to heal, and there is a way to move through something and come to a state of resolution. I know this firsthand. I've helped clients with this where we've really gone through the emotions that have come up around an experience. And it's almost like a process of revision. It's a process of understanding it through the lens of who you are today. Because, like you were saying, sometimes we're looking at the world through the lens of who we were when that thing happened. And so we're still feeling the emotions of that moment, without realizing that we're not the same person and that we've evolved and that we've gone through things, right? And we're able to look at it from that kind of lens today. But when it comes to healing, I think a lot of times people don't realize that you don't really know you're healed until you're faced with the thing that you were trying to heal from. So the example of a relationship, I did a lot of work on myself, when I was preparing to be in a healthy relationship, but the work didn't start until I actually got into a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And then I was triggered, and then I had to go, oh, this is coming up now. I need to actually process this now. And to me, the point of resolution, or the indication of having healed from something, is that I've learned a new way to respond. I'm not responding in the default trauma response kind of
And
way.
that's such a beautiful feeling when you have that moment. When when you're confronted with something and you're like, wow, I reacted completely differently and so wonderfully and in a way that I'm so proud of. It's
Yes.
it's an amazing moment.
So when you're working with people in your capacity as an energy therapist, like, how are you helping them to recognize the emotion or the feelings that they're encountering? Because I know for me, I came in emotionally underdeveloped, I call it. And so despite the fact that I was well into my 20s, I had the emotional maturity of like a 12-year-old, because that's kind of where I had stopped developing, and I wasn't able to grow past that. And so I could really only say that I was like sad, or I was unhappy, or I was happy. Like I didn't have the vocabulary to describe, what other kind of emotions were coming up for you. So how do you help people understand it?
Mm. Yeah, so I think firstly, it's important to name that research actually shows that naming an emotion, the ability to name an emotion, goes a long way in helping you feel like you can regulate it and you can calm
Mm-hmm.
yourself down. And it's not just some nuanced game that therapists play. like,
Yeah,
it's very much backed by research. The reason we're helping you or ourselves identify these emotions is because it goes a long way. It goes a long way to being like, oh, wow, this is what I'm feeling. Okay. And somehow the understanding helps us be seen by ourselves, by others,
yeah,
and really goes a long way towards calming it down. But so I have a few ways in which I help people recognize that they're feeling something specific. One of them is definitely through the talking part, just
hmm,
reflecting things back to them. The second part is sensation based, like we've already talked about. And the
yes,
third part is kind of the where the energy comes in. So it's very much about helping them. I have techniques and tools that I use to help them tap into their subconscious. And very
yeah,
often it helps people get to the core belief or the core emotion. And once they get there, we both tend to experience this big feeling of knowingness. Theirs is
mm,
obviously bigger than mine because it's their experience, and they're the
mm,
expert on their experience. That's a big part of how I work.
absolutely,
And this feeling of knowingness and having their subconscious reflected back to them in this way allows things to really gently come to the surface that may have taken, I don't know, 5 times longer to come to the surface with just talking.
yes.
So that's been amazing.
I need to kind of harp on that for a second,
Yeah.
because it's so important what you just said. There's a lot of people that come to me who've done traditional talk therapy and CBD, and I've done it in the past too, and it's great. But I do find that the over intellectualization of it can prevent us from actually relating to it, right? We're relating to the idea of it, and sometimes we can talk ourselves in circles, but when we actually tap into the experience of it, um, despite how uncomfortable that may be, and it is uncomfortable, first of all, there's two things that happen in my work. My clients recognize that this thing that they were running from, that they were afraid of facing, actually they have the ability to face and overcome. Actually, if they sit with it, it doesn't last forever, like they may have thought. Like it's a temporary moment of discomfort that turns into something else. And then the second thing is that they realize that, like you were saying, they get to that place of knowingness, of like really understanding their experience in a new way. Then it's almost this kind of serenity that you can come to, you know and that is just, I can't even describe the importance of that in a healing capacity, in a healing journey. Myself, having overcome so much trauma, I really suppressed for so long because I didn't know what would be on the other side of facing it. And then when I did start to slow down and do the work of processing it and being present with it, and in my work I call it honoring the emotion, and getting to the other side of it, I was like, this is beautiful, right? But until I went through the discomfort, I didn't know that there was beauty on the other side of it.
Yeah. Um, I'm just taking in everything you've said because it's really beautiful. Um, So I think the first thing you said was really important. The witnessing, the honoring, the being able to face the thing that you're scared of. And
Mm,
I think so the process you're talking about is something we usually learn as kids. So we learn how to co-regulate with someone else. You know,
Yes.
someone's with us, someone's helping us face these scary emotions. And oftentimes, a lot of us, and sometimes through no fault, no one's, you know, it's no one's fault. Sometimes parents were just
Mhm.
unavailable, busy, focused on other things. We don't have that compassionate hand or that compassionate guide when we're younger to help us develop this co-regulation muscle, and that's why it feels so scary as an adult. And to go through the process with someone now is in a way teaching you, you know, we learn how to co-regulate with others, we learn how to regulate with others. So once you're
Uh-huh.
learning how to do that with someone else, it's developing that skill within you to be able to go away later and be like, okay, something new might happen, some, you know, a normal life stressor, maybe even a positive
Yes.
one, you know, you get a new job, you move countries, whatever, like, and
Mhm.
you'll have that skill, like, because you've experienced it with a compassionate guide. um
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's why I the work that I do, I'm so passionate about it, and so it's so important because that recognition that healing happens in relation to other people, like truly. As someone who had experienced so much relational trauma, I didn't trust people, right? I thought that all people were unsafe, and to finally heal, it really did require that nurturing, to be taught how to nurture myself, so that now when I'm struggling, I have that skill, like you said, to nurture myself. But it's not something we're just going to wake up tomorrow. We're going to wake up, and that's kind of part of my issue with like self healer and self help.
Yeah, and you know,
I
there's
know you
people
know.
on posts that say just go feel your feelings, and then I know people who take that very seriously, like especially
Yeah.
people who already are very intellectually capable, and they're like, okay, this is what I've got to do. This is my task. I've got to go feel my
Hmm.
feelings. But then what they end up doing, what I've seen people come in with, is actually so detrimental to their mental health
Yes.
because they don't realize that they're not necessarily feeling their feelings; they're thinking about them, and then they find themselves in
Yes.
a loop, and it becomes really distressing to keep thinking about these negative emotions over and over again. And you know, no judgment, no shade. I've been there until someone taught me how to
Hmm.
do it. I was like in this ruminating loop for a long time. And I think
Hmm.
that's where some of this just social media knowledge can be a little bit like, hey, make sure
Yeah.
you take it with a pinch of salt. If you read something where you're like, I like this idea, go find out a little bit more about it. You know?
Do a little bit more research. Yes.
Yeah.
I think people are very hesitant to recognize that. And I posted something recently about the key to good mental health in my humble experience is it starts with having an open mind. It starts with open-mindedness because you know what you know, right? And this is again the benefit of learning from others and with others, and being taught and being shown how to do things. It's really important to me. And when we kind of think we know ourselves, I had someone say to me, well, I just know myself better than anyone else. And I'm not going to dispute that. Of course, we should all know ourselves better than everyone else. But sometimes there's things we don't know about ourselves and we don't realize we don't know about ourselves,
Yeah.
And so having a mirror, having someone else who's gone through it, who has experience with it personally, who's helped other people with it, who knows how to hold space, because a lot of other things that I've experienced with my clients, and maybe you have with yours, is that people have kind of quasi done the work with somebody, but the somebody wasn't really qualified to hold space, and so when they were activated emotionally, they didn't get that co-regulation experience, right? It's very much, sometimes it's like executive coaching or things like that. The focus is so much on fixing a problem, right, versus kind of teaching you how to understand yourself as a human,
Yeah,
if that makes
and
sense.
often when you address one part of yourself, it has a knock-on effect on a lot of other things. So it's
Hmm.
not like, you know, I have this very specific problem and I just have to focus on this. You can be focusing on your well-being in one area and you'll be learning skills that are going to benefit you in all the areas. And then
Absolutely.
absolutely, like executive coaching is valuable once you have that self-regulation and adaptation skills.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but I also think that there is something to be said for choosing your inner circle in a way
Hmm.
where they can be good mirrors for you. Because it's, I mean, absolutely seeing a professional is valuable, but it's not necessarily the forever answer. It can
Yeah.
be if you're someone who believes in continual growth and upkeep, but it has to be side by side with developing good interpersonal relationships in your life, and choosing people that really honor you and your feelings, and knowing the distinction between, I think when we're younger we have a tendency sometimes, especially as women, to turn our friends into our therapists and do that back and forth, and that's
Yes.
fine and that's cute, but one day you need to see an actual therapist. um,
Just a tip. Absolutely. I agree because I think that people need to have the capacity to hold space, right?
mhm,
I tell people all the time, somebody who can't hold space for their own emotions can't hold space for yours. Like
mhm,
they just they don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
For a long time, I was very, and people wouldn't believe me now because of, the growth that I've experienced, but I was very dismissive of people's emotions because I was dismissive of my own. I was like, what do you mean? Why is that a problem? Just,
Yeah.
blah,
Suck
blah,
it
blah, blah,
up.
blah.
Or just like
Yeah.
do it.
I didn't realize how detrimental it was even for me.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding, like you were saying, the importance of healthy interpersonal relationships. But I think a nuance that I want to add to that too, because I was speaking to someone recently about this, is that knowing our needs, we need to communicate them,
Yes.
right? We need to
Yes.
communicate them, especially like we're not just going to meet somebody and they're going to know, oh, I should check in on you,
Yes. Yeah.
and rather than kind of being like, why isn't anyone checking in on me?
Absolutely.
Maybe you should ask them.
Yeah. And also I think often people are afraid that if they ask they'll be rejected and then that's going to echo their previous experiences. And what I say to that
Yes.
is that's the process of discernment. It's the process of choosing your inner
Mm,
circle carefully. If someone is dismissive when you say, hey, like, do you think you could check in on me when I'm feeling this particular way? It's fine for people to say no. I also want to add that if someone says no, I can't do this
yes,
because of X, Y, and Z. Like, hey, that's something that needs to be respected, and it's a back and forth. It's a dialogue.
absolutely.
But also, if someone is continually in all circumstances more on the dismissive side or rejecting you, maybe it's not about you. Maybe it's about them. You know. So use
Absolutely.
that as data and be like, okay, perhaps this is not a good match.
Yes, and then not extrapolating that to the point where, well, no one will be there for me, right? It's that awareness of this is one specific person and one specific experience,
Mhm.
and is not a representation of everyone and every
Mhm.
experience. I think that's something that when we are in a dysregulated state, this is such an important thing that I want to talk about, is that people think they can think their way out of how
Yes.
they
Yeah.
feel, right? Like we've been talking
Yeah.
about. And your mind and your body connection is literally, dependent on the state of your nervous system. Like your higher mental
Yeah.
faculties, your ability to think, to imagine, to reason, they don't work when your body is in
Yeah.
distress because the resources are going to that,
Yeah. Yeah. And what?
So the work that you do with the body is really about kind of helping people with the nervous system, correct?
Yeah, and it goes a step further, like I said. So there's the energy therapy part, which helps them with literally their energy body. And, it's something that some people sense in their daily life. Like it's very automatic to them when I say, hey, like just like we have a physical body or a mental body, we also have an energy body. And for some people, it's just like, hallelujah, like I've always known this. I'm sensitive to this, like, and now please
Mhm.
teach me how to work with this. And in that sense, it's just about tapping into the hygiene. Like, the same way we brush our
Mm.
teeth, we brush our hair, we shower, there are things we need to be doing for our energy body to keep it regulated, to keep it in a good place. And I have to say, though, that if you have a very ideal set of external circumstances, it's likely that you're already quite regulated. And then you're
Yes.
probably not going to be someone who's very sensitive to their inner workings in
Yeah.
that same way. But if you don't have a perfect set of, or a good set of external circumstances, or if in the past you didn't, you're likely going to have experienced dysregulation. Similar to nervous system dysregulation, you can be energetically dysregulated. So and you're experiencing energy dysregulation and you're not sure what it is. And often people will speak to their
Yes.
doctor, they'll speak to their therapist, and unless those people are a little more clued in, they're just going to be like, nah, maybe you need to just try
Sleep.
harder or do this other thing or do more of this, and no shade to any other professional at all, but I think
No,
that it's more about what we need to add rather than what we need to take out,
yes,
and the extra knowledge we need and the extra guidance we need.
absolutely. I mean, we know this intuitively, right? But people are still, to your point, disconnected from our intuition and our instincts. And at least in the work that I do, when we're numbing one set of emotions, we don't realize that we're actually numbing all of them, right? And I know firsthand that when I thought I was just suppressing my anger, or I thought I was just suppressing my sadness, or whatever it may be, I found out later that I wasn't actually experiencing joy to the full extent that I could
Yeah,
experience
yeah.
joy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I find this a lot
Yeah.
with people where, especially if they've experienced a big trauma with someone, and there's a part of them that almost doesn't want to give that person the satisfaction. They're like, I don't
Yes.
want to give the world the satisfaction, or I don't want to give this person the satisfaction of feeling how bad I feel. But
Mm,
inadvertently, that's how they're blocking their joy and all the good stuff.
indeed. I
Yeah.
know.
By the way, but
I just,
ironically, I'm going to see Inside Out 2 tonight.
oh, exciting.
So I will report back.
Yes. Please, I can't wait to see it as well, and then we can talk about it. I'm definitely gonna probably see it this coming week, probably like a lunchtime movie, because Inside Out is such a good way of expressing or illustrating, I should say, the fact that there are all these emotions within us, and they're each unique in their expression and in how we experience them. Like, it's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece.
Yes.
But I do want to go back to what you were
Mhm.
saying about not wanting to give people the satisfaction. Someone right now who's struggling to release kind of the energy they're carrying against someone who's hurt them,
Right.
and not wanting to give that person the satisfaction, right?
Mhm.
And so they're holding on to that and they're carrying that, and they're not really sure how to release it. And I don't think every kind of resentment, every kind of feeling that we're holding on to, belief that we're holding on to, it carries energy with it, right?
Yeah.
And so unknowingly we're carrying that energy around.
Mhm.
And in my work, I explain it, we need in the form of forgiveness. But forgiveness is just one form of releasing that,
Absolutely.
because I know firsthand that not releasing that in some way, that energy can turn into illness in the body,
Oh yeah. Oh
right?
my God. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think in those cases, it's really important to, like, sometimes forgiveness is not possible, and in that case, neutrality is a really helpful tool. Like, how do I develop a
Yes.
sense of, and that takes time. It's not something you can walk away with
Yes.
overnight just because you know it's good for you. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
just feeling neutral. Like, often people feel this need to be like, oh, that was terrible, but I wish them well. And it's like it's okay. You don't have to wish them
Yes.
well. But it's
Of course not.
equally as important to develop the skill where you're not wishing them terrible things, and that's not because of some moral imperative, it's because it still keeps a part of you tied up with them. So
Yes.
it's not about like, oh, you have to be a good person, you have to forgive, or you have to not wish evil upon others. That's not the point. The point is that when
No.
you're ready, and I really want to emphasize that, because sometimes it's not an appropriate moment to be in that space. Sometimes it's
Yes.
appropriate to be angry and to be feeling all those things. But like you said, it's more about when you've been holding on to it a little too long and it's causing you a lot of distress rather than anyone
Mhm.
else. It
That's
becomes,
it.
yeah, it becomes important to be like, let's cultivate the sense of neutrality so I can take the pieces of me that are stuck in this, even not just in the story, but in the person, the pieces of me, the
Yeah.
literal energetic pieces of me, let me bring them back to me so I can be whole. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's no
I
small
love
feat.
that.
Like, so,
It is not a small feat. Oh my goodness. It is not, because I think people think that forgiveness is acceptance. Like, I think it's saying, well, you didn't do anything wrong. And in my experience, it's more so that it's not acceptance of what they did, but it's acceptance that it happened,
yeah,
right? I think we tend to be struggling the most with the fact that it happened at all. Like, why did it happen? It shouldn't have happened. And, we
yeah,
can stay in that
yeah,
space. And like you said, getting to a place of neutrality is saying, like, I can't change the past. I can't change what happened. I can't change what they did to me.
yeah.
How can I accept that, surrender to that, and then do the work to take care of
But also
myself,
accept
right?
that it's over. Like,
Yes.
accept that it happened and accept that it's over. And in some cases it's not a clear cut over, because sometimes it's relationships
Hmm.
that you're still are still around you.
Navigating.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's like really acknowledging, like, okay, which parts are over. Just because some parts are not,
Hmm.
that doesn't mean all parts aren't. And it's the word discernment keeps coming back to me today, like
Yes.
really cultivating the, and I think it's what you said, it's discernment and nuance go hand in hand. Like, it is about,
Yeah.
yeah.
Looking at
Mhm.
each unique experience for its uniqueness, right? I think
Yeah.
a lot of the work that I do is helping people recognize that this experience is its own thing that you can process and you can deal with. Because, for example, I had somebody explaining to me that I did all this work, I did all this healing work. Why does my mom still trigger me?
Mhm.
And I said, it's not the old stuff that's being triggered. What she just did was not okay. You're upset because of what just happened, right? I think that there's this expectation that, in our human experience, we can just kind of
Be limitless.
evolve or elevate to this
There
place
is this
where.
narrative of, well, you can be limitless. You can do anything you want to do. You can,
Mhm.
once you've healed, especially in this manifestation space, it's like there are no limits. However, that's not what
Yes.
life is. And I'm not trying to
Mhm.
rob anyone of their delulu at all.
I love me some Delulu.
I'm really not. I'm not trying to rob you of your delulu. Please be like as ambitious as you want to and as wholehearted as you want to.
Mhm.
But we live in a world with limits, and sometimes those limits
Yes.
involve accepting that other people may not change, or
Mhm.
that you have limited capacity. Like, you can't just be superhuman in the face of someone's dysregulation. Like, the point is to be regulated enough to maybe remove yourself from a situation, not just allow it. And
Okay, so I really want to dive into the manifestation thing for a second, because I find that world so fascinating and interesting. Because I'm glad I found manifestation after I kind of done my work with emotions, because I think understanding the nuance, I'm like, actually, a lot of stuff that people are repeating, they don't fully understand
yes,
in terms of
yeah,
manifestation. Like, feeling into the end, feeling into the wish fulfilled, all these kind of using your imagination. there's a lot of truth to all of
Mhm.
that, but I think people tend to miss out on the fact that you are a being. So you are consciousness, you are also a human matter, you are also energy. Like you were saying, you have the energy body. And so there's not one of these elements that exists without the other, right? You're in a human body, you have energy, and you're impacted by the energy around you. A lot of times people will say to me, how can I, how could I have manifested this situation in my life? And I'm like, who says you manifested this situation in your life? There are other people that exist in the world too. Maybe they're manifesting things that are impacting you, right? So it's like understanding that nuance. It's not that we don't create our reality, but I like to explain it in my world. When something happens to you, you get to create what happens after, right? You get to create what happens next because you get to choose how you take care of yourself, if you need care, who you get help from. Like you have agency in that capacity. It doesn't mean that you created the horrible thing that happened to you. I would never say that to somebody,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's also learning to tune your energy to the world around you, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Like focusing on, to me, there's no harm in focusing on what you would like to experience or what, a positive thought or whatever the case may be, as long as you're not simultaneously denying or ignoring or suppressing what you're actually feeling, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
Yes.
like, if we bring manifestation down to really practical terms, and like,
Hmm.
I'm a Virgo, so I'm going to make everything really practical.
Yes.
So, if you bring manifestation down to really, really practical terms, what does the word manifestation mean? It means to make manifest something, literally to
Yes.
make something happen. And
Yes.
I don't mean to say that the energetic part doesn't exist at all, but if you can look at it just from this lens of like, oh, like for example, I want to go to law school. Therefore, I'm going to study for my LSATs and I will take my LSATs and then I will get a good grade and then
Hmm.
I will be able to go to law school, hopefully. And there's
Yeah.
a process. You have to apply. You have to. I mean, sorry, it's been a while now, but you have to apply for your
No, yes.
licenses. Like there's a whole process, and it's not about just kind of. I think unfortunately the manifestation world has made it seem like you can just sit in your room, pray, and like envision
Yeah.
yourself as like Elle Woods at law school,
Hmm.
and it's just gonna happen. Like
It's coming back on Amazon Prime. I'm so excited. Side
the
note.
word manifestation, it means to make something happen. So like you are in
Yes.
charge. Like once you've healed, once you have resources, once you have a good foundation
Hmm.
underneath you, it means you have more access to making things manifest in your material reality, right? So
Yes.
sorry to poo-poo on the whole thing, because I do believe that you can be someone who attracts a lot of serendipitous things based on like how
Hmm.
regulated you are and how aligned you are.
Yes.
um, but I
Yes.
think modern manifestation is too removed from any kind of common sense sometimes.
I, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that it can be used as a way to escape what you're experiencing and to escape what you're actually feeling. And what people don't realize is that when you are regulated, when your energy is clear, when you can think clearly because you're regulated, then you can manifest from that place, right? As you're moving towards that thing, if you're having a lot of thoughts that tell you you can't do it, you're not good enough, that impacts your energy, that impacts how you're feeling emotionally, it's going to be harder to take that action
That's it.
towards that thing and make it happen,
That's
right?
yeah.
So,
And
yes, if you want to manifest, tune your energy, learn how to process your emotions, you will manifest like crazy.
totally. And there's research that shows that when you visualize something, it is easier to get to that end goal. It's not just,
Yes.
woo woo stuff. There's research proving that and showing that. But I think because there's enough stuff out there telling us that we can imagine our realities into being just like that, I think it's necessary to
Just
also
like
be the
that.
voice of like, hey, you have to take this action. Like you have to make things
Absolutely.
happen. And I think where the nuance comes in is like, say you're trying to make something happen and the door keeps closing. I think that's a moment to sit down and be like, okay, what's happening here? Is it something that I'm doing? Or is it just that maybe I'm being told that this is not it? Do I need to make something happen elsewhere? Do I need to redirect my energies? And or do I need to just go and study again and do the LSAT again? Or like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's where the nuance comes in and the individuality in your situation comes in.
Yes.
And yeah, yeah.
I always use those moments to say, why do I want this? Like, why am I working on this? Why, because sometimes when the door keeps closing, we realize like, actually, this wasn't my heart's desire. I was trying to get approval. I was trying to do what someone wanted me to do. And it's such a good time to stop and be like, is this actually for me? Is this actually what I want? And check in and then redirect. And the last thing I want us to talk about is kind of the stages of healing, because I have a framework that I teach and that I wrote in my book and I take people through. And the last stage of that is action, because to me, there is no healing unless I've responded differently to a situation,
Yeah.
right? I can process, I can become aware of my patterns, I can do all of that. But if I'm still behaving the same way, I haven't actually resolved it, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to just talk about kind of the stages of healing from your perspective.
So this might be a bit of a plot twist, but for me, the stages of healing are very much about um, stopping, pausing, and acknowledging
Mm,
how far you've come and taking in what's around you, and also like enjoying the fruits of your labor. Because I think sometimes we can get so invested in the healing process, and sometimes it's necessary to go through a period and a phase of that. But, and then there are times where it becomes your entire identity or your whole personality. And then that's where you have to be like, hey, healing has an end. The point of healing is that there is an end point. And that's not to say that you may
yes.
never have to start the cycle again. You probably will if you're a human being who wants to keep growing and evolving. And, I think that's the
Mhm.
kind of people we are. Like, I always want to be a better version of myself. But there has to
Of
be
course.
an understanding of the cyclical nature of it, and being like, okay, maybe this round is complete. Maybe I can have some
Yeah.
fun. Maybe I can use this newfound well-being to go do something really fun and to enjoy my
Mm.
interests. Like, read a book for fun, listen to a comedy podcast rather than a healing podcast. Like,
Please,
um,
although listen to this podcast. No, I'm kidding. But
give
absolutely.
you full permission to be like, I am done listening to this episode. I'm going to go do something fun right now.
Yes.
And just,
Yeah. Well, I hope that people can recognize, to your point, that like healing is not this never ending thing that you should be enduring. If we look at our body, if I break my arm, the body gets to a point where my arm isn't broken anymore and I can move it. And it's the same emotionally. Like we get to the point where, yes, we've processed what needs to be processed and now we can just live. And that's why I always go back to, if you're getting your needs met, you're going to be okay. And part of our needs is fun, is leisure, is pleasure, is connection, is having something that gives us meaning, right? And so I think, to what I was saying to somebody earlier who was telling me, I've done all this healing, it's never ending. A lot of that was quasi healing. It wasn't actually healing. It was kind of staying and, like you were saying, recycling
staying in the
emotions or
intellectual part
recycling the
of it. Yeah.
story. Yes, yes, because it should get to a point where you're just like, to me, the cycle is very much, I've been wounded, I've recognized that I've been wounded, I've taken care of
Mhm.
myself, and now I'm thriving. Like, to me, that's the cycle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We want to get to the place where, okay, I'm back to thriving, because the point of healing is to get back to that place of well-being and restoring it.
Hmm.
And to your point, sometimes people don't realize that fun is the thing that they need to heal,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And like allowing, sometimes the healing is about being able to allow joy back in, you know?
Oh my God,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
Absolutely. Well, thank you so, so much. I hope that if you listen to this end of the episode, that you do go and do something fun now, that you took in some information and you can go and integrate it in an active way. I love walking in the forest and being around trees. I think nature is such a great way to co regulate, in my experience. Call somebody that you feel like
yeah.
talking to.
Also, permission to
Uh,
party. I feel like the whole social media space is all about like, oh, I'm just taking these beautiful baths and like have my candles on and my incense on and like this is my healing era.
yes,
Sure, sure. But if you're someone who's an extroverted person, maybe going to a party is going to be amazing. It's going to be the thing that you need. Maybe going
yes.
out clubbing, maybe, do what you got to do. As long as
Fill
you're
up your
taking good
cup.
care of yourself, like those
Yes.
things are not to be, demonized. They
I
have a
agree. I
role.
agree. Find the things that fill you up and energize you. Move towards that, right? And also, I mean, the culmination of the work that I think both of us do is helping people recognize that you're not broken, that you're not fundamentally broken, that there's nothing that's just wrong with you, that you just need to keep chipping away at and trying to fix. You're meant to live. You're meant to experience life, and processing your emotions, healing your energy is just there to help you experience life in a better way, right?
That's
So
it.
I
That's
hope
it.
that.
Yeah.
Do you want please leave the listeners with any kind of parting words other than go party. Just share any final words for them.
No, I think those are my final words, and I love note that you're leaving us on, so I'll just stay with that.
Amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much again, Bhavna. All of Bhavna's information of how to find her will be in the description of the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be in the description below. And look out for another episode from us very soon, where we'll dive into hopefully Inside Out 2 and some other things as well. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, please leave a review, please let me know what you thought. And if you'd like more of this, I'd be happy to do that. All right, with that, I love you so much for listening. As always, be gentle with yourself. Bye.